Anwar. I am the chair of the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. It is 9:07 p.m. Would like to call July 23rd, 2025 Committee on Innovation, Data, Education, Analytics meeting to order. This meeting is being held via live broadcast. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our new student representative, Lisa Cantu. I'm sorry if I did it wrong. And those joining us via video conference. Members, when I call your name, please announce your presence. Stacy Hawk, Richard Clemmer, Juan Narez,
Present.
Welcome Wilson,
Present.
Lisa Cantu.
Present.
Please record in the minute that we have a quorum. Agenda item 2A is consideration of possible action to approve the minutes from April 23, 25 committee meeting. Members, do I have a motion for approval of the member?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposes?
No.
Any discussion anyway? Those in favor of say aye, okay. Motion passed.
Yeah.
Okay. Go. Okay, the motion passes. We go to agenda item number 3 is a public testimony on agenda items relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Education Analytics. We do not have anyone registered to testify. See, we'll go to the next item. Agenda item number 4 is consideration of possible action to approve the consent calendar. The consent calendar calendar includes the items that can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need to be more of our attention. The consent items are highlighted items in the gray on the agenda. We are going to vote on the consent items in two votes, non-rule items and rule items. Remember, the following are the items on non-rule consent calendar. 5A, 1 through 3, consideration, possible action to approve the appointment of members to the Financial Aid Advisory Committee, the General Academics Institution Formula Advisory Committee, and the Health Related Institution Formula Funding Advisory Committee. 5C, consideration of possible action to approve faculty salary increases report. Members, do I have any want to remove any items from the consent calendar? Or does anybody wants to add items to the consent calendar? Member, is there a motion to approve the non-consent calendar? Second,
Second.
all in say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Members, next we will note the on the rule consent items. These are the either technical conforming or implements non-controversial policies around which there is consensus. The following are on the rule consent calendar for consideration. 5D1. Adopt the recommendation of relating to the 4-year rule review of Board Rule Chapter 1J concerning the Financial Aid Advisory Committee. 5D2. Adopt the proposed amendment to Board Rule Chapter 1J Section 1.152 concerning the Financial Aid Advisory Committee. 5D4. Repeal Board Rule Chapter 13F Section 13.108 concerning the tuition rate for students. 5D7. Repeal Board Rules Chapter 13H Section 13.140-13.143 concerning reporting of tuition and fees. 5DB. Repeal Board Items Chapter 21A Section 21.4 and Section 21.7 concerning general provisions. 5D9. Repeat the Board Rules Chapter 2100 Section 21.2230 21-2232 concerning provision for notice to student regarding tuition set aside for financial assistance. Members, do I have anyone wants to remove any rules from the consent calendar? Does anyone want to add any rules to the consent calendar? Do I have a motion and a second, please?
So move.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This favors all. Okay, the motion passes. Agenda item 5C and 5D and 1 and 2 were approved on the consent. Agenda item 5D3 is consideration of possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13, Subchapter A, Section 13.1 concerning.
You missed the page.
I missed a page.
You
I'm
missed the
sorry.
page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I missed a page. Agenda item 5A, 1 through were approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5B is consideration of possible action to approve the report on student financial aid in Texas higher education fiscal year 2024. Dr. Charles Contoro, Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid Program, will provide a brief presentation and be available to answer any questions. Mr.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you all on the report on student financial aid in Texas higher education for fiscal year 2024. Next slide. This annual report, which the agency has published since 1993, serves multiple purposes. Most notably, it fulfills several legislative reporting requirements relating to financial aid and affordability, which are summarized on this slide. It also serves as a resource for institutions, researchers, elected officials, and media. Questions we receive from outside the agency are often handled by directing people to the tables and figures within the financial aid report. Before giving you a very brief tour of this extensive document, I'd like to acknowledge that creating something like this report requires significant time and effort. To that end, I am grateful to the members of the Student Financial Aid Programs Division who collaborated in assembling this report, as well as the team in the Data Management and Research Division, who provided much of the data within it. Next slide. At the core of the financial aid report is the financial aid database, which includes student record level financial aid details for more than 1.5 million students attending a public or nonprofit private institution of higher education in Texas. From that remarkably detailed data, we're able to provide a comprehensive view of financial aid and affordability generally in Texas higher education. We can think of this view as happening on three levels. First, the big picture, featuring the macro trends affecting financial aid and affordability statewide. Second, at the programmatic level, seeing the ways our various programs contribute to our overall strategies. And finally, as a point in time, each report reflects data from a single year or cohort, but when combined, these annual reports reveal the overall impact of our efforts, including successes and areas for improvement. Next slide. At the broadest possible view, more than 1 million students received more than $13.5 billion in financial aid in the 2023-2024 academic year. Next slide. While state appropriated programs represent a relatively modest percentage of overall aid for students, our programs are impactful and lean heavily on grant funding. Next slide. The data also tell a story about the challenges students still face regarding affordability. In this chart, the red portion at the top of each bar shows the average unmet need for students receiving financial aid at each type of institution. Even after considering these students' expected family contribution and financial aid coming from federal, state, institutional, and private sources, the average student receiving financial aid still has between $11,000 and $17,000 in unmet need, depending on where they are enrolled. Many students can overcome this level of need without excessive borrowing by working part-time, living at home, scaling back expenses. Many others cannot, however, and this chart represents a very real impediment to their academic or financial goals. Next slide. The program profiles included in the report for our grant, loan, work study, and loan repayment assistance programs not only provide quick snapshots to answer common questions about the programs, they also help inform everything from our legislative requests to operational decisions. Next slide. For example, this chart from the Texas Grant Program profile shows the three pathways through which a student can gain initial eligibility for a Texas grant: the high school pathway, the associate degree pathway, and the TEOG pathway. You'll notice in the columns on the right that transfer students who are eligible for Texas grant typically make up less than 8% of all Texas grant recipients, despite representing up to 30% of students eligible for Texas grant. These insights helped form the basis for the creation of the Texas Transfer Grant, and then moving on to the rider in this year's General Appropriations Act that specifically directs Texas grant funding to TEOG pathway students to address funding needs for these transfer students. Next slide. I'll close by acknowledging the long-term value of the report. Each financial aid report reflects macro, institution, and program level data from a given year. And we know from feedback that institutions value having access to this data to track year-to-year changes and long-term trends. The current biennium saw several significant changes in financial aid. The agency launched the Forward Loan Program, the Texas Leadership Scholars Program, and the Texas Transfer Grant Program. We implemented our manageable debt calculation, which significantly changed the agency's approach to student lending. And the legislature made dramatic increases in funding for the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program during the current biennium. The impact of these changes won't announce themselves in a single report. Taken together, the financial aid reports as individual entries in a longer story will yield insight into the state of financial aid and will help guide our efforts to expand access and improve affordability for Texas students. Thank you for allowing me the time to provide you with an overview of this report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Members, is there any questions? If not, I'd like to have a motion and a second.
I do have
please.
a question.
Oh, you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Would you mind go back to table 8? So am I understanding this correct? So only 18% of students that are basically associated. So these are the students that are in a
Which table again?
table 8.
8.
Just want to
Slide 8?
slide 8, yes.
Yes, okay.
So am I understanding this correct? I mean, one of the things I see is a significant drop in percent of eligible from 24% to 18%. So it's dropping. Does that mean the number of students that are eligible that are actually getting financial aid is dropping?
This figure, let me just make sure I'm looking at the table right. This represents the, so looking along, say, the fiscal year 2024 line, it represents that of all the students who demonstrated eligibility for the Texas grant based on core requirements such as meeting the priority expected family contribution, filing by the priority financial aid deadline, looking at those pieces. Across all of those, about 75% of those came from the high school pathway, about 19% came from the associate pathway, and then about 6% came from the TEOG pathway. So in terms of looking across the years of all of the eligible students, there has been a shift in greater numbers coming from the high school pathway. Now, as to whether that translates to meaning that there are, fewer students that are completing associate degrees and transferring, we would need to look at that in more detail from the enrollment side of the house, because this just takes a picture of the were you eligible for the Texas grant program. But we could look into deeper as to kind of what might be the background in those shifts that occur.
Okay. Because my understanding is that more people are taking the associate path, that the number of people that are actually taking that 2-year, it's actually increasing. So it's just this interesting that it's dropping.
Mm-hmm. We can definitely look into kind of the background of those numbers. And it is something we're hoping that with the funding that's being provided to allow us to support students that will be transferring through the TEOG pathway, which also can impact the associate pathway as well, that more predictability in the funding will hopefully help support more students taking those transfer opportunities.
Because, I mean, community colleges are the ones that are typically, those are the students that need the most financial aid.
Yep.
Yeah. Dr. Contreras, can you talk a little bit more about what it will mean now for a student to be treated as a renewal as opposed to being considered as a new applicant for a program?
Yes, one of the challenges and like kind of the most dramatic piece you can see is in the very last column. You'll see that students that came through the TEOG pathway, which means they received a TEOG grant while they were at a 2-year institution. They completed at least 24 semester credit hours with at least a 2.5 GPA and transferred to a 4-year institution. You'll see that, while about 6% of all the students that are eligible for Texas grant came through that pathway, they represent less than, 0.1% of all of the recipients. Part of the challenge that occurs with students who transfer from 2-year institutions to 4-year institutions is a timing piece. Students coming from high school apply during the fall and spring of really fall and winter of their senior year and are finding out in the spring where they're going. Whereas transfer students typically don't apply until the spring and find out during the summer. What often happens at four-year institutions is that by the time they get to their transfer, all the money has run out because our Texas grant program isn't funded to support 100% of all of the students who are in it. So what the legislature has done this year is provided us with a specific pool of money focused on the TEOG pathway, so that if a student does, transfer from a 2-year to a 4-year, having received a TEOG with 24 semester credits and a 2.5 GPA, there will be a pot of funds specifically to ensure that those students receive a Texas grant at the 4-year institution. So we will go from, barely funding any of them to funding everyone who demonstrates eligibility through this. So really treating them like a renewal student. And the reason we say that is right now our Texas grant program puts priority on renewal students. So if you've had Texas grant in the past and you're eligible for it again, institutions make sure that those students have continuity of funding. So similarly, now you're going to see portability, that you've got the TEOG at the 2-year, you move to the 4-year having met the eligibility requirements, and you'll have that continuity of funding. You will get a Texas grant. You'll kind of move seamlessly from the TEOG program to the Texas grant program.
What percentage was being covered before this change of students? What percentage of students were getting the funding before?
TEOG?
Yeah.
They represented about 6% of all of the eligible students, but we only funded less than 0.1% of them.
Okay.
So now, the ideal will be that this chart in the future, it starts with the 26-27 year. Ideally, this chart, when we get to fiscal year 2027, the percent of eligible percent and the percent of recipients should match, ideally.
Okay.
So
It sounds like they fixed it.
they certainly poured some money in to help make sure that this portability issue is much stronger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you briefly describe the qualifications for the other two pathways as you did for the TEOG?
Sure.
Associate
Yep.
in high school.
Yep. The associate degree pathway is you graduate with an associate degree and you transfer to a 4-year institution within 12 months. And one of the things to be aware of that is in the sake of trying to make this not too complicated table, we definitely have people who are both associate pathway and TEOG pathway.
I was curious how you delineated it.
So right now, there's actually some TEOG pathway showing up in the associate pathway numbers. And so those students who are both TEOG and associate pathway, they'll qualify for this concept of, receiving funding.
And why do we break those two apart?
Statutory, that's how the statute was set up.
Okay.
It has to do with how the Texas grant program has grown over the years. If you really want to confuse yourself, read the Texas grant statute one day. It is a program
That's
that
right.
kind of started and then has had pieces added onto it. One of the first pieces they added was the associate pathway. If you get an associate's degree, transfer within 12 months to a 4-year, you get funding. Then they later added the TEOG pathway because there are many students who will start at a 2-year, transfer to a 4-year before having actually completed their degree. And so they added some qualifications that, the theory with the associate pathway, you've completed an associate degree, you've demonstrated your ability to succeed in the college environment, as you go on to the 4-year. The TEOG pathway, they put in those markers of you've done at least 24 semester credit hours with a 2.5 GPA, So even though you haven't finished your associate, you've demonstrated the ability to succeed in the collegiate environment, and so funding those. And then the high school pathway is another one that has grown. It started out with just that you know, have graduated from high school, and you know, you're enrolling in a four-year institution within 15 months of graduating from high school. And then they added the priority model, that does give priority to individuals who have completed at least 2 of 4 key metrics. And those metrics, one of them is having completed some dual credit or international baccalaureate coursework. Another is that you have completed a certain level of math courses. Another has to do with your GPA. You can also meet it by being within the top third. So really identifying who are the individuals in high school that have demonstrated the most their ability to succeed in the collegiate environment. And if an institution doesn't have funding to fund all of their high school pathway students, then they prioritize those who have met the priority academic pathway. So really there's, like, we could make this table have all sorts of columns to it, but the high school pathway has always been funded very strongly. You know, about 95% of students through the high school pathway receive that funding. You might say that it's actually even a higher number than that because of the 5% who don't. Some of them don't get it because they're getting other programs that achieve the same goal as the Texas grant. You know, if someone's already getting a full ride through other things, you know, they don't also get the Texas grant. So it's probably closer, you know, to 96, 97, 98% of high school students that currently get funded. This additional funding is going to really try to increase, you know, the percent of students that are funded through the transfer pathways.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? If not, I need a motion and a second, please.
So move.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes based on votes. Agenda item 5C is consideration of possible action to adopt proposed amendment to Chapter 13, Subchapter A, Section 13.1 concerning definitions. Dr. Cantaro will provide the presentation and be able to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to present some proposed rules to you at this meeting. The first of which is the proposed rules for Chapter 13, Subchapter A, which Subchapter A is the general provisions for Chapter 13. Specifically, the proposed rule would amend the definition of census date, a critical deadline that relates to the collection of tuition and capture of enrollment for formula funding purposes. In addition to incorporating the instructions from the Coordinating Board Management Reporting Manuals directly into the rule, the proposed rule also makes one substantive change to current practice. The rules define Class Day as a day in which the institution has regularly scheduled classes that occur as scheduled. This allows for emergent circumstances like a natural disaster that otherwise could affect the institution's ability to accurately capture enrollment. So if, for example, an institution's classes are substantially disrupted or canceled on a day leading up to the census date, that date would not meet the definition of class day, and the census date would be shifted accordingly to the next class day. What this does is that it allows the institutions to be able to administer this independently, rather than what's occurred in the past that requires the agency to issue guidance every time a natural disaster occurs. So this allows a much more ministerial implementation by the institutions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
If there are no questions, do I have a motion and a second, please? Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda item 5D4 was the, oh, I'm sorry, the motion passes. Agenda item 5D4 was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5D5 is consideration of possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13, Subchapter F, Section 13.101 concerning authority. Dr. Quintero will provide us the brief presentation and be available to answer any questions. Please.
Thank you. So the proposed rule relating to formula funding and tuition charges for repeated and excess hours of undergraduate students makes non-substantive conforming changes by updating the authority statement and retitling the subchapter appropriately to reflect the removal of tuition-related items, which was necessary due to consolidating all tuition-related rules into Chapter 13, Subchapter G. So the creation of Chapter 13, Subchapter G caused us to go back, scrub through all the other rules, and figure out where are different changes that need to occur. So we made these non-substantive changes to conform with the creation of Chapter 13, Subchapter G. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there any questions? If not, I need a motion and a second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 5D6 is consideration of possible action to adopt new board rules, Chapter 13, Subchapter 6, Section 13.120, 13.121, 13.123, 13.128 concerning tuition fee. Dr. Quintero will provide the brief presentation and be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. So these proposed rules are the rules I just mentioned for the creation of Chapter 13, Subchapter G relating to tuition and fees. This subchapter is part of the Student Financial Aid Program Division's effort to improve the overall transparency and navigability of its rules, in this case by consolidating all tuition-related rules into a single subchapter, helping ensure that the rules remain aligned, using consistent phrasing and terminology to provide clear guidance on a critical issue for institutions and students alike. While the reorganization was the primary goal, we did identify a few areas in which greater clarity was required, resulting in a few substantive changes from current rules. The proposed Rule 13.121 relating to definitions provided an opportunity to reduce burden on institutions by consolidating a dozen different definitions of a fee into one definition, which in turn helps reduce reporting requirements for institutions. The proposed Rule 13.123 relating to the collection of tuition and mandatory fees maintains the current expectation that tuition and fees shall be paid in full by the census date unless the student meets specific exceptions. The proposed rules reconcile the various statutory deadlines associated with tuition collection and formula funding and acknowledge the specific expectations under which tuition and fees are not required to be paid in full by the census date, such as if a student is paying by installments, if there are financial aid delays, late changes in enrollment, or small residual balances. And then finally, proposed rule 13.128 relating to the ROTC program fee calculation codifies the coordinating board's existing methodology for determining this fee. This is a new rule, but does not represent a change in practice for the agency. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? If not, I have a motion. I need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
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 Okay, second. Sorry. Members who are in favor say aye. Those
Aye.
who says no. Those who oppose say no. Motion passes. Okay. Agenda item 5D, 7 through 9 were approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item C is adjournment. Do I have a motion and a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We will now take a short break to allow staff to set up the committee on academic and workforce success meeting.
Thank you.